I gather you can see my screen.
Yes.
Good. Great. All right. So again, for those who have just joined us now, thank you so much for making the time. The purposes of this call is to provide you with more information about the Systems Change and Social Impact course taking place September 29th to October 3rd at UCT's Graduate School of Business. It's a week-long executive education course in partnership between the business school, the executive education team, and the Bertha Centre, of course, who I represent here today. Fundamentally, we're going to walk through a couple of questions, a couple of invitations to think a little bit more deeply about whether this course is a good fit for you, what you might be seeking from executive education or leadership development courses in this year that continues to be full of surprises and difficult complexities. Then I will be walking through some of the broader course principles, what informs the course, what do we mean by systems change, and what does that look like in the program. I will sort of provide some time to walk through the didactic and pedagogic views of the previous two iterations of the course, and hopefully that will give rise to a set of questions, responses, and I really want to encourage you to be as engaged as possible in this session. We've got a few Mentimeter polls coming up that will surely help to kickstart that engagement. But if you have any other questions that don't link to our prompts that you'd like seen to, then put them in the chat. I may not be able to get to all questions today, but if I don't, then we've got your email addresses and we'll make sure to reach out to you with the right information that can help clarify whatever it is that you might be asking about the course and or about the Bertha Centre's other courses and trainings and capacity building programs. So with that in mind, I just want to keep sort of make a point of saying that as much as this is about exploring the course, it's also about engaging you as cross-sector peers to shape how we might better communicate the course, how we might better let the course meet today's leadership realities. The course has been in a sort of a evolution since its first outing back in 2017. There've been a couple of consistencies concerning how we've sort of presented the course content, making sure to put as much attention to the social sector and social entrepreneurship as possible back in 2017 through to 19. But more recently, we've recognized that this course is helpful and in demand with people across different leadership domains in different sectors. And so we're currently in the process of looking at our curriculum, looking at our faculty, looking at the programs from the last few years and making sure that we can repurpose it so that it is as relevant and as connected to your everyday realities or the realities of the course delegates as possible. So that's why, your engagement here actually helps us inform how we continue to develop this course. So now, sort of before we jump into an outline of a course and what's in the program, and then, of course, handing over to Executive Education's Taryn to run through some of the administrative and coordination-oriented details. Before we jump into that, we just wanted to give a moment to hear from you, to hear where do you feel stuck right now, to name one challenge in your leadership or organization that feels stuck. The idea is to submit those responses via Mentimeter. Natasha, just confirm that you've put the Mentimeter link in the chat box. Nothing yet. But sort of the idea here is to use your own words, drawing on examples from your everyday experience at work or in your professional, personal domains. Where are you feeling stuck? Where do you feel that the complexity or sometimes even chaos of the current day or your sector, your particular problem area, issue area that you are concerned over or responsible for? Where is there stuckness? Where are things not moving? Where is there challenge that feels as if you don't have the resources to meet it yet? Natasha, please confirm, have you popped the Mentimeter in the chat?
Yes, the link is in the chat. Thanks,
Okay,
Natasha.
thank you so much. And then, whether it's about your growth and your capacity to scale, or your culture, your operations, your understanding of how your organization leverages innovation internally and also externally, or perhaps it's about stakeholder engagement and convening. So, what is it that feels to you to be a pertinent challenge? Of course, inherently, we hope that the challenge that you share with us on the Mentimeter is also in some way connected to why you're even joining this call, as one way of bringing new perspectives and new tools into your team or into your own professional practice. Try to keep it relatively short. Natasha, how are you about screen sharing? Can I hand over to you? Can you share as the answers start to emerge?
Yes, I'm happy to start sharing.
Good. I'm going to stop sharing briefly just so that we can see what's coming up. And for those who are greeting in the chat box, thank you so much. It's really helpful to see who's in the room and where you're calling in from. Hello, Tsepo. Hello, Alex. Okay, so a couple of responses coming forward. Thank you. Operational culture. Just while, thank you also for those who are putting your answers directly in the chat box. That's still useful. Just while you're responding, I will ask a few clarifying questions here. Whoever said operational culture is stuck, if you don't mind saying a little more about that, do you mean the sort of the way that you do operations in your organization? If you could add a little more color to that one. Okay, nothing yet, no worries. Adoption to necessary change is slow and met with resistance. Yep. Lack of understanding with the social impact space and systems. Leadership applies traditional ineffective responses that have short-term reactive impact. That rings a lot of bells. Getting stakeholders to converge on a standard operational plan. Engaging in systems change when resources are constrained, being continuously dragged back to default. If you could just scroll up there, Natasha. Please scroll up. Changing careers. Look, I'm looking at changing careers into consultancy as I'm stagnant in my academic role. I see other communities having to make changes for sustainability and other resources. Is this the course for me? And then on the left, customer retention is a challenge mainly because the organization is rigid to embrace change in terms of the development of the system. And then you've put there technology, broadly speaking, I guess. Okay, so we've heard about resistance to change, resistance to adapting our professional practice to the ever-changing needs of present day and the multiple crises that we sometimes might feel inundated by. We've heard about sort of the difficulty in bringing stakeholders together, aligning interests, operational plans, culture, stagnation, and also a broader sense of sometimes being less aware of the impact space and systems, the interrelated systems of various impact economies. So this gives us a good launching point into a little bit of a sense check as to how some of these issues intersect with the purpose of the course. If Natasha, if you could stop share and I'll go back to the slides. So just to be clear, the course, when we talk about systems change, and I'd like to hear from the room as what people's definition of systems change is in a moment, but we talk about it from a perspective that sometimes sounds quite theoretical and quite abstract, but the course is designed in a way to enhance practice as much as is possible, and we give a lot of time to tooling and to training those tools, and then we give some time after each content day for what we call a systems change case clinic. And that is an opportunity for you to bring live challenges into the course experience. It's of course in person, it's peer-based, and by peer-based we mean that the case challenge or the particular wicked problem set that you bring from your organization or your own professional experience into the course, we want that to have space for you to apply the different tools, the different frameworks to that challenge, even though of course it's such a limited amount of time and we often find ourselves quite constrained by this 5-day format. We try to create a sort of lab-oriented approach to testing these tools on a real-life problem. So it's not to say that we're promising that this course can solve big, enormous issues that require convening across your system, but really to just see it as a lab to sort of test out how these tools might be applied and to start getting your practice ready for when on Monday morning the next week you have to return and bring a lot of this content into the real world, where of course, as some of the responses to the Mentimeter described, where there might be some stagnancy, even resistance to change in practice. And when we say it's practitioner-led, it's to say that, and I'm going to walk through the sort of didactic outline of the course in a moment, but that we put a priority on course material being presented by faculty who have not only studied and understood these concepts in depth from an academic point of view, but have also led or been a part of projects, programs that have applied some of these concepts in the field. We wouldn't, never in the course of a 5-day experience are we able to touch onto all sectors. So we wouldn't promise that we're able to cover case studies from a range of different sectors that represent everybody in the delegate cohort. And every year we get delegates from vastly different experiences and backgrounds and even regions and countries. But we do try to get as much of a spread so that we can represent examples of how this is applied in various public health systems or in entrepreneurship ecosystem development, or in impact investing and so forth and so on. And there's a whole bunch of new cases that we're actually going to bring into this course, this year's course, that we're quite excited to explore with the cohort. We structure a lot around peer-to-peer learning. So there's segments on the course every morning for what we call mentorship circles. And this is really an opportunity to have a smaller dialogue circle of sometimes 3 to 5 persons to discuss the material from the day before, how it might be landing, what people might be struggling with. And then we have the co-conveners supporting those different dialogue circles and making sure that there's always time for reflection and integration before we start with new content and every next day. And then just to mention that there were a couple of sort of points in the Mentimeter responses that for me make me recognize how important it is to say that this course is specifically rooted in global South contexts. So impact sector or systems that correspond to how many people who come to this course can actually resonate with. We found that in many systems change or systems thinking oriented education, especially exec education level coursework on the market, that a lot of it is rooted in global North academia and pracademia and cases, and we try to be really cognizant to root a lot of our examples and a lot of our practice cases in contexts that are familiar to delegates. So just to sort of put a focus on that. There is a sort of, with this in mind, I wanted to go to the next poll. And so I'm going to stop sharing and Natasha's going to throw up hers in a moment. But essentially, you've just had an opportunity to share your response to where it is that you feel stuck in your organization, in your work, and now to answer from the other side, what's one shift that you think might help you to lead with more clarity through that challenge, whatever it is you had in mind, even if it's personal, even if it's more on your own personal professional journey. So I'm going to take away share screen and ask Natasha to share so that we can
Great.
see the responses.
You can continue to use the original Mentimeter link.
Thank you. Natasha, is there any way of removing that QR code? If not, no problem, but I can just see on the shared screen it blocks out option 1. Thanks. Yeah, if you want to check all the boxes, is there an option? I think there is an option to be able to check multiple. Negative. No. All good, Natasha. You can pop back up to present. Thanks. Okay, so a few responses coming through. What is fascinating to me is the lack of any clicks for new leadership frameworks. That is interesting. But when we look at, I just want to ask for a couple of responses from the room before we go any further. And of course, if you haven't added to the Mentimeter, it's still live. You can still use the link to contribute. Just a word from the floor here for anybody who might have, thanks, Ruth. Monitoring and evaluation isn't really reflected. It is actually reflected in the course week. We just didn't want to flood the amount of options here. Thank you for that. I'll come back to that particular point in a moment. Just from anybody who specifically selected diagnose system dynamics, if you can share a little bit more about how that links to your work and to the area that you feel a little bit stuck about. Anybody, if you want to put up your hand or just unmute and make a noise.
Hi, everyone. Adisha
Hello.
here.
Hi
How are you
there.
doing, Fergus?
Very well.
Yeah, I think for me, diagnosing system dynamics, one of the challenges, especially when you're dealing with organizational change, is balancing, a machine that works well in terms of its business strategy, but one that's trying to expand into different fields of social impact or positive impact, or just more responsible business. And so you kind of want to expand while keeping everything that is working like on the road, if I can put it that way.
Yeah.
And I think diagnosing the system dynamics allows you to understand how far you can push certain systems to expand what is currently being done.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you. Thank you for that example. I mean, I would take it that you would need to do that exercise, if you will, with a broader team, or at least with the team that is responsible for that growth.
Yes, ideally, that would be a team effort, but a lot of the time, especially, well, in my personal experience with social impact, it kind of becomes a very siloed thing. You have one or two specialists who are running with it, very disconnected from the rest of the team. So ultimately, any moves they make, everyone hates it because it's adding to my workload. It's making things more complicated. It's, it's scuppering like a well-oiled machine. So there's a lot of that resistance. So an appreciation of the dynamics and how to challenge the dynamics while still keeping all the humans happy. It's a interesting conundrum.
It is an interesting conundrum, and it sort of links with that, with sort of the alignment of stakeholders, so better alignment of stakeholders, and maybe one of the words that sort of pops out for me is incentive. So incentive alignment, because if there's an incentive to keep the well-oiled machine running, and if indeed it is sort of just adding more work and making things more complicated, the argument could be made that we're essentially not aligning the opportunity of doing a better systems dynamics diagnosis, say, with a bunch of different stakeholders properly, or sometimes not clarifying upfront where there may be risks to some of the partners. And by risk, I mean more work, or perhaps a systems intervention or systems initiative of some kind. If the system changes, it might threaten a particular partner or stakeholder's workflow or job or relevance, and so forth and so on. And so, yeah, it does. It gets very messy. And so that, to me, I suspect, is why perhaps the stakeholders section has certainly been popular. Anybody, just in reference to stakeholders, anybody who clicked align stakeholders better, to add a little bit more material or unpack that for us?
Sure, I can go, Harvey.
Sure, thank you.
So one of my I work a lot with government, and particularly in the sector that we work in, there's quite a number of specifically early childhood development. There's quite a number of different players, from the social sector to funders to national, provincial, local government. And yeah, so it's a very complex system with very different stakeholders with, also very different mandates. And so I think just getting that right to kind of align on what the core issue is and agree on moving forward on that, is currently quite a complex issue. And I think it's just one of those things that I'm interested in.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. Would you say that would you say that sometimes it's particularly tricky or difficult because sometimes there's a sense that we aren't seeing the problem similarly?
Yeah, definitely not seeing the problem similarly, but also because different departments have different mandates, and so their priority might be very different to the DBE, for example, and so just getting people to align on the one key issue, I suppose, that they all understand in the same way, and agree on that, even if it's not necessarily a top priority for them, but like them seeing how it basically gets things stuck, or it can unlock quite several things.
That makes sense. And it also sort of speaks to the previous speaker's reference to needing to make changes or make clear decisions about growth, say, with, say, the diagnosis of systems dynamics, in order to avoid potentially losing what does work once one grows or scales or whatever is going on, and ultimately that process needing to be plural, needing to have input from multiple parts of the system that needs to change, whether it's a company, a firm, a broader non-profit organization or foundation's work, but seeing that as a system and recognizing that it can be quite difficult to unstuck that system when ultimately, similar to what Norms had just said, There are different incentives, different competing objectives, different ways of even seeing the problem. Okay, so a lot of this links directly to where the course, I think, leans quite strongly into, which is around convening, coalition building, and systems change convening tools for guiding these kinds of multi-sector or multi-stakeholder processes. And what we found is that where the course is strong is in providing lots of examples, lots of references to different ways that it can be done. Where we found that the course hasn't often been able to serve the delegates in this regard is being able to have more practice time. And so this year around, we're putting more emphasis on the practice time that practitioners get to give of their time and their expertise after presentations, after discussions and dialogues, to really run short experiments. This sort of speaks to the case clinic as well. Ideally, you don't bring various case clinics, case clinic challenges into the course. Ideally, you bring one, and then we can workshop that and work through all of the different practitioner-led session tools to figure out how best to provide you, I guess, with a suitable set of pathways to take to make this actually work in your organizational settings. When it comes to new leadership frameworks, the course tries to look at leadership a little bit differently through, say, complexity-aware literature on leadership, complexity-aware literature on change management, and so forth, that speaks to this emerging, I mean, I guess it's been around for a little while, but it's certainly having its heyday, subject around what's been called systems leadership. So that's sort of leadership that takes a systemic view on things, that recognizes the different dynamics, the second, third order effects of changes and adjustments that we might make, and make sure to bring everybody along at every point of the process. So if you could stop sharing there, Natasha, briefly. Thank you so much. So that's a little bit about some of what takes place in the course. I'm going to shift over to our last Mentimeter of the day. I'm sorry, I've gone Mentimeter mad, but I really just wanted to. Sorry, oh, where did it go? Okay, well, it's probably later on down the line. Really just wanted, before going any further and using some of the responses that have come up in the previous Mentimeter responses, sorry, to just lean into, like, what do we mean by definition of systems change? What do we mean by systems change? And I think everybody has probably a different way of being able to frame it. I'm very curious as to how you would frame it. I think we do have another Mentimeter coming that provides everybody with one more option to share your perspective. But what we mean by it, and I'm going to speak to this slide just using the top sections of each word bubble or word column. So systems change being about shifting or changing the mindsets, the mental models, in order to address underlying root causes through intentional process and design, taking a complexity approach or living systems approach with the outcome of creating different behaviors and outcomes over time. Like, that's just using the top section. And you can see as you glance down the different word columns, different ways of saying similar things. If you glance down the third word column, you'll see intentional process design to have strategic multi-stakeholder approaches coming together across systems, working together, and so on and so forth. Okay, all of this really speaks to systems change being a practice, more so than a sort of theory, or more so than a hypothesis of change. It's really about taking a completely different position when it comes to our social impact work. And the argument that the course makes, and any systems change practitioner or academic would make, is to say that ultimately, if we're genuine about our interest in changing, in really changing the underlying conditions of the problem sets that we all care about or that we all want to see made different, then we need to tackle these problems differently. We need to be able to start looking at problem sets differently. We need to be able to start to diagnose the different dynamics at play, the different key relationships, feedback loops, and balancing conundrums that take place in any given system, and name them and see them and communicate them and bring people on board for how we might have more agency in changing them, as interrupting and complicated as that sometimes can be. And sort of the underlying, I want to say, mood of the course is this idea of epistemic humility, in the sense that until we can be a little bit more humble and a little bit more uncertain and welcoming of the uncertainty as to what we know and how we've come to know it, and our expertise and how that expertise might inform how we're currently doing our work in social impact or otherwise, then it's really difficult to start to see different ways of understanding, different ways of positioning ourselves, different ways of being able to tweak and leverage the systems to change. So that's just a little bit about what we mean by systems change. The course does lend quite a lot of its I should say it's praxis, or it's teaching style, it's practice from Bertha Centre's litany of projects that use social innovation and systems change to effect different social impact across our different portfolios, whether it's youth development, innovative finance, health systems, climate justice. So a lot of that work and a lot of how that work has been reported on, has been learned from, will find its way into the course. And we also consistently keep in mind, through the way that we're teaching, the way that we're lecturing, the way that we're presenting, and then of course practicing the different tools, the critical, which at least in my opinion is sometimes missed, the critical piece, which is your inner condition. So sometimes people come into courses and it can be all very top heavy. And we try to very gently and seamlessly weave different opportunities to reflect and to rest and to integrate, so that your own experience with the course content doesn't shift your inner condition into a situation of, oh, this is too much, this is overwhelming, and I don't know how to bring this back to my organization, to my team, to my business. So we pay a lot of attention to that, and some people call that awareness-based systems change, but really, for me, the best way to describe it is just sort of ordering our priorities in a way that actually makes sense. Because ultimately, if this coursework is only academically interesting or only theoretically challenging, then it's not doing the work that it wants to do in the world. Sorry. And so on that note, throughout the course, and I'm about to sort of walk through how the course is structured day by day, we speak about navigating uncertainty and finding new models and frameworks to navigate uncertainty while still maintaining some agency. We speak about constant purposeful reflection. We use the mentorship circles to create openings for purposeful reflection, for sharing, for peer-to-peer learning. We have a strong preference towards living the behavior. So whenever we finish up a particular course content of each day, we're asking ourselves, okay, what does this mean on Monday morning? What does this mean to my team? How might I share this with my team? How might I enroll other team members or colleagues in this learning journey or this learning process? And so forth and so on. These are the key principles that perhaps inform the way that we like to share the material. I'm going to perhaps come back to this, but this is just I just wanted to disambiguate, because sometimes there's people will share systems mapping, systems thinking, innovation, change interchangeably. Actually, let me just quickly speak to this briefly. When we talk about systems change, bottom left of the slide, we're as was present in those word columns, we're looking at processes. We're looking at processes of change that are in any case taking place. And we're asking ourselves, how can we leverage those changes or leverage our organization's practice to enable the whole system to evolve to its next level of organization or its next level of outcomes, or where we want it to head. So we're not just looking at from a project point of view, we're looking at an ecosystem or a systems sort of or sector-wide point of view. But if top left, what do we mean by systems thinking? There, we're just really speaking about a lens, a way of looking at the world differently to help us to have more agency and bring more people along in changing the paradigm. And on the right here, when we talk about systems mapping, which can also be just called systems diagramming, this is just a set of different tools, visual tools, practical tools that groups can use to develop a better understanding of of the system in concern, and a better understanding of where they are positioned in it and how they might be able to position their projects for greater success or impact. And finally, sort of systems design is, okay, now we want to define we want to have a process of defining the required systems components and connections and different partnerships and stakeholder engagements that might be necessary in order to reveal or change or adapt the architecture of the broader system. So what does that look like in terms of the order of each day? Like I mentioned, each day starts with a mentorship circle. This is a smaller peer group, call it a syndicate, and it synchronizes, comes together at the Graduate School of Business. We make some space for that. So at least an hour each morning. We have a bunch of guiding prompts and questions that syndicates or peer groups in the past have used, and sometimes they've just gone on their own learning journey, guided by a convener or practitioner present. That's to reflect on the previous day's content and work. Then in each day after the mentorship circle, we place all new content that links to, say, cases and relevant experiences, either from Bertha Centre or Bertha's broader partnership networks, their cases for systems change and systems change projects and initiatives. We pop that in the morning while the minds are still fresh and there's still a maximum amount of space to take in more new information. After our break, we then drill down further into whichever content was presented in the morning slot to really surface, well, the so what, like, so what tools, what frameworks, what different leadership styles were used in order to make this case happen, make this particular intervention work. And then after lunch, which is provided on site, after lunch break, we then take up a little bit more of a, how should I say, a little bit of a more of a high level view on whichever tool was drilled down with. So if the particular case had a lot to do with stakeholder engagement and convening for systems change, then we're going to look at those tools. We're going to look at those process design possibilities. And then after lunch, we're going to think a little bit more deeply about what that means in terms of complexity science, in terms of how we understand deep leverage points and change processes or advocacy. And then finally, after an afternoon tea and coffee, we provide some time for application, for you actually now applying that work and those tools to your particular case challenge. How that looks, just as a sort of overview, this is 2 years ago, just a sense of how the course is structured. So it's the same, it's obviously the same setup, but just with some of the content. If you look into this view, I'm obviously not going to speak through each day in extreme detail. I rather wanted to use the didactic approach to provide the detail of how we structure the course. But what I will point you to is just the top row of theme, recognizing that in each day, we usually focus focused around a different theme around understanding systems change and social impact. So the first day often has a lot to do with staying in the problem. So really negotiating to what extent have we limited our understanding and therefore agency around certain complex problem sets. And unpacking what it means to take a complexity-informed view of different social and economic challenges that different delegates might bring into the room. And that really sets the scene. We do a lot of systems mapping, a lot of uncovering different biases or different sort of preconceived assumptions that limit insights for change. Day 2 or Tuesday, we then start to think, okay, well, what kind of applied techniques are there to handle this kind of complexity? And here we, as I said earlier, with the didactic view, in the morning, there will always be a case study. In 2023, we did a case study of an angel investing case study and entrepreneurship ecosystem in East Africa. And then after that case and a tea break, we then dig a little bit more deeply into what tool was particularly useful in that case. And as you can see in this particular view in 2023, the tool that was mostly interesting here to dig down into with the case was forecasting and backcasting, or thinking about futures and foresights through a systems lens. And so it goes. Wednesday, strategies for driving systems change. There we're talking about systems sense making. How do we make sense? How do we do things differently? How do we develop programs and sort of find deeper leverage points in our programs so that we can do more with less resources in many cases. And we put a lot of attention to collaboration and coalition building and how we do that differently. And so this is just a view of this approach to focusing on limited content in the morning, drilling into the tool, providing a little bit more high-level understanding of that tool and that content through a systems point of view, and then how you apply it to your own work here in the systems case clinic. This hour here is almost never enough. And so we often do go over time, but last year we encouraged participants, delegates, to use some of their tea break to start unpacking what they wanted to work on with the faculty or co-conveners. So that's just a little bit more about the course. And then, this is just a list of 5 outcomes, but really there are many more. And ultimately the course is a transformative learning journey. There's a lot more that takes place for each delegate and their organization that is unique to them and unique to you. Yes.
Sorry to interrupt. I'm just noting the time, and it would still be great to hear from Taryn, please.
Oh, thank you very much. I'd 1:45. Sorry, my clock is not showing. Okay, so this is the close of the presentation, and then I do want to just sort of elicit a few more responses before we hand over to Taryn to close out. Ideally, you come out of the session with tools to make sense of complex systems, to diagnose your systems better, to understand where there's room for improvement, room for growth. Ideally, people come out of this program with adaptive leadership capabilities, so different tools for convening and negotiating between coalitions and partners, strategies to align and activate those coalitions, and the confidence to intervene at leverage points with greater clarity and a greater understanding of what's at stake and what's needed. And of course, it's all done in a peer-to-peer learning environment. So that's the course in a nutshell. I'm sorry if I have used more time than I planned to, but I just wanted to speak to the program proper as much as I could. Before I hand over to Taryn, are there any initial impressions, questions? I might not be able to answer all of them right now, but I promise you, if you pop a question in the chat box or raise it now, that I will promise to get back to you by email otherwise. And just while I give a moment for anybody to raise a hand, I do want to quickly hover back to a question that I received around monitoring and evaluation. And my understanding of the question was it was just asking, is monitoring and evaluation reflected in the course in any way? This year, very much so. There's actually there's 2 cases that we're going to link up very squarely with one of the days. Either the Wednesday or the Thursday of the course, which really speaks to complexity-aware MENL and systemic impact investing and evaluating programs with this lens. We have actually Bertha Centre specific programs and projects that have recently been concluded that we want to bring into the course. So yes, this will definitely be reflected. We're quite excited to share some of that work too. Any hands coming up? Any thoughts, responses? Yes, go ahead.
Fergus,
Yes.
colleagues. No,
Hi there.
I saw, yes, I noticed the health systems case study from the last run. I wanted to know whether, I mean, what types of case studies are you looking at, if any, if that's already clear for this upcoming intake? Yeah.
So yes, I mean, there'll be a case study per day. Well, Monday through Thursday, I should say. So there'll be a case study for each of the first 4 days, where the last day is more focused on group presentations and the certificate process ceremony, and then a group activity altogether to cap off the week. I can't speak to the specific case studies on each day at this point, but if it would be valuable to you, as soon as that's been confirmed and finalized, I'm happy to actually just send you a little blurb on each of those case studies that might be represented. But I can only share them once they've been double confirmed and faculty is all happy with how we're balancing the case studies. Is that okay?
Yeah, thanks, Fergus. Yeah, you any sense of a timeline towards that?
Towards that,
Yeah.
unfortunately, much later, as in probably I can only probably give you clarity on precise case studies mid to late August. I can't.
Okay.
I can't promise any earlier.
Okay. Thanks. No, sure.
Any other suggestions or comments, questions? Main chat. Aha, yes, registration deadline and price we're going to right now. And yes, thanks, everywhere. We are sharing a wrap-up mailer, which will include this recording. It will also include a video from the wrap-up of last year and a reminder of my email address and or other opportunities of engaging with any of these kinds of questions. And I now see your question about the case studies. What are the typology? As diverse as we possibly can be. So as I said earlier, we can't represent every sector present during the course week, but we will be as diverse as possible. And for sectors or particular problem areas that we aren't able to cover with case studies in the week, I will certainly be able to assist you in connecting the dots to partners or case studies that do better reflect your particular problem set area. I'm going to hand over to Taryn for questions concerning the application deadline, registration deadline, pricing, etc., and of course the discount options that are available this year. And then once again, please, even while I'm still on the call, you're welcome to throw direct messages or messages into the chat, and I will work my way through them before we close this info session. Thanks. Over to you, Taryn.
Thank you so much, Fergus. Thank you again, everyone, for joining us. It's wonderful to see everyone in the room. And Fergus, it was such a lovely presentation going in depth around the program. We are super excited to deliver an iteration this year. So I am cognizant of the time. So I'll try and speed through kind of like the necessary points. But just in answer to the questions. So I'm going to share my screen shortly. But before I do that, I just wanted to frame that this course, yes, it's a short course, but you are actually applying to a higher education institute. So you are registering for a course at UCT. And so if you are interested and you're ready to jump in and register, you have to actually apply for the course. So I know I'm stating the obvious, but we've seen some very interesting and funny things over the years. So I thought it's important just to frame that that when you are ready to have that intention in mind that you are applying to UCT. All right, so I'll just share my screen. If I can just get like a yes, no, you can see it. For anybody on the call?
Not yet.
Nothing yet.
Yes. Yes, coming on. Can see it.
Awesome. All right. Perfect. So in terms of, just to answer the question, I did see it in the chat, but it's also on the webpage. The link will be shared as well. Pretty much very important, application deadline is the 9th of September, and there is a time stipulation there at 2 p.m. So 9th of September at 2 p.m. with a program fee of 17,500 Rand. So to kick off with the really good news is that there are I want to say event-specific discounts. So because you have all attended this info session, this qualifies you for a 10% discount for the course fee. In addition to that, if you do have a group of 2 or more from the same organization, you will also be entitled to that 10% discount. So we will have a list of everybody that's on the call, so we will be able to see, if we can apply that discount for you. But just as a very thank you for joining us, you will get that 10% discount for joining us on this info session. So once you are ready to kick off with your application, you would navigate to the course web page, and the apply button is here on the right hand side. It is easy to miss, but just I've identified it here. You click on the apply button and there will be a pop-up form. This form, fill in those details on there. Once you have submitted this pop-up form, it will take you straight to your unique application link. So it's important to note that your application link will come through to your inbox, and you have to scroll all the way down to actually start the process, which is step 1 over here. Once you have clicked through on that, it will then take you to your actual application form. I'm wondering what is this red line over there, apologies. Let me just make it a bit bigger so that you are able to see. So the application form consists of 6 parts. It's your personal data, and then it's your employment information. Billing information is a section for uploads, where you have to upload your CV as well as your ID or passport. And then from there, it's referral information, which is pretty much just we want to know where you heard about the course. And then lastly, it will be your statement of integrity. So in your personal data, it's really, I want to highlight, really important that you put the correct name, your correct name and surname. As I framed at the start, it's an academic institution, so it means it's an academic record. As much as we would love to call you by your preferred name, your academic record needs to align with your ID. All right. From there, we do ask about disability and dietary requirements. This is, of course, just to make sure that your experience is a good one. So if you are vegan, please click vegan. If you are allergic to shellfish or allergic to anything, please let us know so that we are able to cater accordingly for that face-to-face week. Then contact information, your delivery address, citizenship status. In terms of the delivery address, this is just in case anything can happen during that week. And if we need to courier your certificate to you or courier anything that may come up, we would need to know your preferred delivery address. From there, we go on to your employment information. Employment information is really for the university's data collection. So specifically for our rankings for the business school, we collect this information for our rankings. And it's just a question around your work experience, your management experience, and then your current employer, or if you're self-employed, of course, you would then insert self-employed. From there, it's your billing information. So we do need to know this in order to send the correct invoicing, particularly if your organization / company is paying. They would have very specific need to have the correct details on that invoice. If it's your company, really important that there is a VAT number, or if there is no VAT number, to state that, either not applicable. The account contact information, this is really important. Your name as the delegate will be on the invoice, but if your company is paying, the person who is facilitating that payment directly needs to be on that invoice, whether it's the finance administrator or your manager or a member from the finance team. It's really important that that person or that individual's details is in the account contact information. From their billing address, we need a physical address of the company, and that will also reflect on the invoice. I can't stress how important enough the accurate detail of billing information is. It's going to hold up your application, because we're going to go back and forth requesting this from you if it's not within your online application form. If it's yourself, then of course you would click person and you would put in your own details. From there, we have the upload section. So this is where we need your CV, up-to-date CV. Always good practice to keep your CV up to date. The reason we need your CV is that your CV is reviewed by the convener of the program. So Fergus and team will be looking at your CV. And then your certified ID is for the university's purposes for your academic record. So these two documents, very important, again, with intention to take note of that and to take care of what you submit when you are applying. So once you've uploaded your documents, you are almost there on the 5th part of the application, and that is just, where did you hear about the course? You'll have a drop-down list either with your organization, perhaps a digital advert, maybe just a quick web search. Wherever you've heard around the course, you would then choose your option. And then from there, it's a statement of integrity, which is just stating that what you have inserted in the application form is true. And you pretty much just doing a digital signage that this is your information and it's true. So you would click on your application is complete and your name and submit. Perfect. So I know I've rushed through that, but it was just important that you do have an understanding of the layout of the application. Once we've received it on our end, my team and I will support you through that financial administration, and then from there getting you officially registered for the course. Outside of the actual registration process, there are also other team members that are eagerly awaiting to welcome you, and that's in the form of the program coordinator, who is working alongside Fergus and team, as well as the program administrator, as well as the admissions administrator, as well as me. So we really, really are there to hold your hand and to make sure that you are onboarded and supported throughout the program. For any questions, my contact details will also be part of the mailer that will be shared. But once again, thank you so much, everyone. Over to you, Fergus.
Thank you very much, Taryn. And thanks again, everybody, for your attention. I know a few have dropped off, and thanks so much for your messages. You'll receive an email from us within the coming week with this recording and a couple of other goodies to keep you in the know. And we have a question that's just come through in the chat box. Is that true, Taryn? No. Is it one or the other?
Correct. Unfortunately not, Leandi. Thank you. Thank you for a good try. But the discounts are not applied concurrently. What will happen though is that we'll apply the higher discount if you qualify for one or more.
It's a good clarification. Thanks so much for asking it though, because I'm sure that would have been thought of a couple of times and not raised. Thanks. Yeah, so you'll hear from us soon, and my email address is in the chat box. Please do not hesitate to reach out to me there with any other questions about systems change materials or ideas or questions that may come up after this session. Thank you for your time and your attention. Have a wonderful evening further.